what we have is people getting very sick of being told blatant, utter blatant lies. Nigel Farage is saying this, Lawrence Fox is saying this, Tommy Robinson is saying this. I think cancel culture is taking another very sinister turn. We've moved from pronouns to male rapists in female prisons in nothing flat. Trans women are men. Change my mind. We have people masked chanting in support of terrorist organisations and openly condemning and threatening Jews. So if you are a queer for Palestine, how do you feel about all of that stuff? No. Forget the gobbledygook. I found out that there was a hate campaign against me, an Islamist hate campaign. Now, when things like that happen, that's kind of quite serious because...
Tell me the tragic story. I was watching you talk and you spoke beautifully about Pete Newbon.
Pete Newbon was a academic, a lecturer at Northumberland, I think. He was Jewish and he got into a spat with somebody else about anti-Semitism. I'm just trying to remember the story now. And the mob came for him and tried to make out that Pete was anti-Semitic. One thing led to another, and the university got involved. There was a pile-on. I think something like 5,000 people complained about him. And then this Kafkaesque process of punishment, the process is the punishment, kicked in. Several things happened to him at the same time. His father died at the same time, I think. And tragically, he killed himself. He jumped off a bridge.
It's terrible.
This is one of the things about cancel culture. It's devastating. And the interesting thing about where we are at the current moment, at this current moment in time when we're speaking now, is that I think cancel culture is taking another very sinister turn. Okay, so at the moment, I'll tell you what I mean. At the moment, and I know this because I've been on the receiving end of pylons and a cancellation as well, right? So at the moment, what happens is you say something, the mob disagree with you, you are a heretic. So they try and take your livelihood away. They try and shame you publicly. I think what's going to happen now is they're going to lock you up. I think we've seen that over the weekend, the idea that big figures, Nigel Farage is saying this, Lawrence Fox is saying this, Tommy Robinson is saying this. It's incitement. No, it's not. They're just expressing their opinions. They've got nothing to do with what's going on, I would say. Okay. But people are saying it's incitement, that word, and they should be locked up. I think that's where it's going. And I think it's incredibly frightening.
This is with regards to the riots taking place across the UK at the moment. And I found myself getting quite angry watching Sky News yesterday, and I was just amazed at the one-sidedness of it and this constant Tommy Robinson. It was really interesting to see. It was as a study just to go, okay, what's going on here? And it was that Tommy Robinson was spreading misinformation because he said that there was a guy covered in blood everywhere, that he was stabbed by protesting Muslims. And this was an example of misinformation, and Elon Musk is terrible for defending him because the truth was this person who was beaten to within an inch of his life had been beaten by blunt objects and not stabbed. And Sky News didn't point that out at all. It was just Tommy Robinson. You'd walk away from that if that was all you knew, with the impression that Tommy Robinson made up the whole thing. Why is this agenda coming from the likes of mainstream channels like Sky News?
I think it's because it's something they bought into all their lives. And if you completely believe in something to the extent that it defines your identity, I don't think this is just about a set of beliefs or a set of convictions. This is who I am. Okay, so these people are absolutely bound up in an identity, because the left, very much identity politics is about what it says. It's about identity. It's not just ideas. It's about who they are. If you admit that you're wrong in terms of policy, okay, you're wrong in terms of ideas, we shouldn't have done that, the whole house of cards comes down. Your whole being, your whole self comes into question. And I think that's what we've seen over the last 30 years. I think post-Blair, we've fallen into this identitarian religion, I would call it. Okay, I think identity politics is akin to a religion, and it's very difficult, for the reasons I've just said, to turn your back on everything you've ever believed. But also socially, it's incredibly difficult as well. You know, if we're going out to dinner, or you know, we've got friends in common, and then all of a sudden I say to you, well, Andrew, you know, I think mass immigration is a real danger. I think trans women are men. Then what happens when all of these things that hold you together as a group of people, it suddenly falls apart? So it's very difficult to walk away from something that everybody thinks.
I think some people might think it's hyperbole that we're going to start getting locked up for these things. But I have seen videos. There was sort of an old man who got the police. Did you see that one? The police came knocking on his door about, and I don't know how vicious the hateful things they were saying was, but I do wonder if there's anything. I know that in Germany, for example, you can't deny the Holocaust. You go to prison. I'm not sure I like that law as much as I even more I dislike people who deny the Holocaust. But where do you stand on that? And do you really see that happening more and more? That you know, hate speech or whatever that means is going to get us locked up?
I think all we have to do is look to recent history, okay? We've moved from pronouns to male rapists in female prisons in nothing flat. If I would have said to you in 2014, Andrew, we're going to have male rapists in female prisons with blonde wigs and pink leggings, you'd say I was stupid. I don't think the conceptual leap between cancellation, losing your livelihood, and cancellation, going into the pokey for 6 months for saying wrong things, I don't think that's as big a leap. I think it will happen. I'd like to be wrong. I'd like to come back in 2 years' time and you say, well, you were wrong about that, weren't you? And that'd be brilliant, you know. But I'm worried. I'm worried that not only that's going to happen, I think there's going to be a retrospective thing as well. That's the other thing, you know, and people are already talking about this. Oh, you said this on Twitter, or you people like us, you said this on television 2 or 3 years ago. Can we talk about it? Because you broke the law. This law that created 2 years after you said it. Again, I don't think that's a huge conceptual leap either. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know, but I'm worried about it.
A lot of these ideas, well, some come from America, of course, and a lot of them also start in universities. Are you able to talk about your job at University of Leeds?
I can't talk about the details, but I can tell you how it feels to be on the receiving end of a pylon, to be on the receiving end of threats and cancellation and all of those things. But because it's still ongoing, I can't talk about any details.
Are you able to say like what your role at Leeds is?
Yeah, I've had several roles. I'm a lecturer in performance and cultural histories. I've been an admissions tutor. I've been a director of student education for a school. I've been a mentor for lots of members of staff. I've been on a research contract. I've taught in higher education for over 25 years. So I've got quite a bit of experience of the sector. So I know what's going on, and I know the changes that have occurred. So I would say I was quite comfortable in the sector up until about 2012, 2013. I probably didn't agree with many people. I was a bit of a heretic, but it was kind of okay. You could have a disagreement. You could have a discussion, right? You could speak, and there wasn't a sense of, if you think A, B, C, D, and E, then you are in some way wicked, or you are in some way evil. I think that changed round about, I'd say about 2015, something like that. It went on steroids with BLM, and then universities and higher education and education more generally became a very different place, I would say. Lockdown poured fuel on the flames. And since then, it's just been one thing after another, which mirrors society. But I think the difference with higher education is that higher education has driven some of this stuff, okay? And it's a kind of breathless situation in which we find ourselves, where we went from BLM, we went to lockdown, we went through a green frenzy, then it was trans issues, and now it's Hamas, for God's sake. So higher education generally is a very uncomfortable place for people like me.
Absolutely. Are there particular moments where you were maybe taken aback by a response by a student or a professor when you were just speaking about something relatively tame or something? Are there moments when you went, oh gosh?
There are. I wouldn't really want to talk about specifics in that way just at the moment. It depends what's going to happen over the next few months, I think, really. So I will talk very specifically then. But I can talk in more general terms, which might in some ways be more helpful. I've looked aghast, really, seeing what's been happening across campuses over the last 6 months or so, since October the 7th, has just been a vision of insanity. I've walked on a couple of campuses in that time. I've been away from work, but I've walked on a couple of campuses at that time, and like many other people, I've seen the footage. Higher education is a world that's upside down. Okay, we have people masked, chanting in support of terrorist organizations and openly condemning and threatening Jews. We've seen it on campuses right across the country, and it's frightening. I can say something that's happened to me, because it's got nothing to do with what I've been going through specifically, but it's something else. I found out that there was a hate campaign against me, an Islamist hate campaign of posters against me on campus, which was my face distorted with the word Islamophobe underneath it. Now, when things like that happen, that's kind of quite serious, because these people aren't interested in just shouting you down or calling you names. In fact, you don't know what these people might be capable of. So for me, I kind of just step back and think, wow, this is a dangerous place for me.
How did it feel to see that image?
I didn't see the image. I was told about the image, so I still haven't seen the image. I've been told from several people. It was a shock in some ways, but this is the actual shocking thing. In some ways, it wasn't a shock. I was kind of half expecting it, right? So it immediately put me in mind of Kathleen Stock, who went through a similar kind of thing when the trans frenzy was happening. And she spoke really eloquently about leaving campus for the last time and knowing that she couldn't go back. I'm not sure whether I'm quite there yet, but I will admit to being scared.
Yeah, bloody hell. I think most people listening, viewing, can't even imagine that. I mean, when you're on the wrong side of Islam in particular, but I mean, even if it wasn't that, even just some students on campus putting your face out there everywhere, I mean, that's just horrific. So I'm sorry you've gone through that. And so I don't want to get you in trouble. I don't know about what you're speaking about, so I'm not but I understand there's some sort of process or investigation to do with controversial things. Is that right?
Yeah, I think there's no secret about what I think. I'm a member of the New Culture Forum. I'm on podcasts every week. I come on shows like this. I'm on GB News and Talk TV and all of those things. So I do feel strongly that that Jews are under threat in this country. I'm frightened of Islamism. I don't think that's a phobia. I think that's a rational fear based on empirical evidence. I'm also a gender realist. I don't tend to say gender critical, like my friend Gareth Roberts, who's just written the brilliant book Gay Shame. He says gender realist, and I think he's right. So that is essentially where I come from on the big issues that are tearing up campuses up and down the country. I'm on the wrong side. Okay, I'm completely on the wrong side with all of those things. But the irony is, of course, I think and speak for probably a huge portion of the population who feel exactly the same. And I think we're in a situation now which is different to how it used to be in the past. So I think in the past, universities used to be a kind of vanguard of ideas, and they used to test ideas, okay? And that might be where we go. There's always a bit of craziness, and there was always a bit of silliness, and it was extreme, and people could protest and stuff like that. But generally speaking, they were a testing ground, a marketplace, if you like. I think they're the opposite now. I think they're indoctrination centers, right? And I think the ideas are the same ideas, recycled over and over and over. So it's very easy for you to think a particular thing about BLM, and to think a particular thing about trans, and to think a particular thing about the environment, and to think a particular thing, shock horror, about Hamas. Okay, all of that is linked because it's ideologically coherent. That seems to be the underpinning. I wouldn't really call it an intellectual underpinning on campus. I'd call it an ideological underpinning. And I think that's a different thing. I think there should be a place for people like me to really push back on these things. I mean, without fear of having poster campaigns and stuff like that. I think I should be able to say, trans women are men, change my mind. Okay, I should be able to say that because that's what we used to be able to say. But it comes back to what I was saying before, and it's this thing about the connection, the interplay between who we are and what we think. Okay, and it comes down to subjectivity, doesn't it? And lived experience, that idea of I am what I think because I live it every day. And if Andrew, if you challenge me, then you're not just challenging what I think, you're destroying me as a person. So it's very difficult to negotiate that terrain in a meaningful way because I come into it scared.
It's such a compelling way, I think, psychologically to react when somebody is maybe defeating you logically or making you pause for reflection about something you were certain about. It's so compelling that I think even many anti-woke speakers, all of us, sometimes fall into that trap. I was talking to Alex Phillips yesterday.
Yeah.
She's brilliant and she was great, but she was saying that she doesn't mind catcalling. So I was just saying, well, hang on, a lot of women don't like catcalling, and I don't know that we should encourage catcalling. And then she said, and I think it was just a reaction, and she said, are you a man telling a woman what to think? And I said, hang on a minute, it doesn't matter. These are ideas, and you're trying to shut me down. And I think she acknowledged that. She sort of said it with a smile, because she was obviously, I suppose she was mocking the woke thing to an extent, but also partly trying to use that. And I suppose it's a sad state of affairs when we go to these, I suppose, thought-terminating cliches to just shut down opposition. You're attacking me. I can get myself as well, I suppose, in an empathetic way, I can try and get myself into the space of an 18-year-old. I studied at Leeds University, so you would have been. Were you there? Were you there?
I've been
2008?
Yeah.
I didn't see you.
Yeah.
I was studying English, but I can imagine. I remember I was never woke. I wasn't that active politically, but I remember there were times that that person's an evil person. So I can imagine getting to a place where I'd see you and go, I don't know much about him, but he's one of those evil people. And I think what's really insidious is they get to then go around the students and believe that they're being genuinely rebellious by just parroting the very thing that they're all saying. That must drive you crazy.
Yeah, I think something else has happened as well. You kind of expect 18-year-olds to do that. Okay, and we all did that, and to a certain extent, I think you're right. We're all guilty in some respect. Of, oh my God, you think that? Okay, but most of us, I think, should be able to say, especially if we're grown-ups, should be able to say, okay, hang on, let me go away and think about it. Let me calm down. Let me think about the ideas and then come back to you. And then most people will be able to say, well, actually, okay, yeah, maybe you're right. And I'm not right about everything. My God, of course I'm not. I'm wrong about, lots of things. But I hope I've got the integrity, at least, to admit it sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes. But I think my point is, what's happening is that this identity thing, I am what I think, or I think what I am, and my lived experience is everything, okay? That has been going on for quite a while now. This isn't just 18-year-olds who think this, yeah? This is 2-3 generations of academics now over the last 20-25 years who think this. So you are getting people in middle management positions and senior positions, professorial, who think exactly the same thing, who aren't in lots of ways that different to the 18-year-olds. That's the scary thing for me. I was thinking again about this new government, and they are essentially 80 students, radical 80s students, Rick Mayall types in the young ones who've grown up. And I'm not sure they've grown up that much. So I'm worried about that. But I think all of these things come together around identity politics, and this thing called lived experience, which is used as a battering ram, as a I say this, as a I think that. Of course, we don't have that. That's the one thing we don't have as white males. And for me, I'm older than you, as a white middle-aged male. My God, I'm at the bottom of the pile.
As a white male, that offends me.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there you go. There you go.
Do you ever get the compulsion, the urge to, and I mean this in a metaphorical sense, because people, I've realized, take things very literally, but when I say them, obviously in the comments, but to sort of get a Clockwork Orange kind of hold open the eyes of some of the professors, at least, and say, this is history, this is what's happened before, when we've begun saying you can't insult these people because they are the victims and so on. Do you want to sort of go, because some of them must be history professors and things who are still, or scientists like Neil deGrasse Tyson, I always sort of lay in, because I cannot believe what some of the stuff he's saying about gender when he's supposed to be a scientist. You want to sit there and go, do you get that sort of anger? Do you get that urge?
I didn't used to, because I thought, well, it'll it's so crazy, it'll sort itself out. And loads of people who are there on the ground and in the journals will battle these things out. And of course that hasn't happened. I do get it now very much. I feel as though it's completely insane that we think of history in terms of groups of people who are either oppressed or oppressors, and history is this big struggle for glory. Okay, it's Manichaean. It's heroes and villains. Yeah, and I've lived in Leeds for quite a long time. I've just moved out of Leeds, but I lived quite near to Hare Hills, where the rioting was going on. I lived in a different world. It was called Chapel Allerton, and it's a completely different world. But it is Cheap by Jowl. It's next door. I was flabbergasted at the narrative that immediately sprung up about the sectarian councillor, the Green councillor, who became a hero, who was there.
Mothin Ali.
Yeah, that's right.
This is the Allah.
Yeah. Okay. He's a hero. Yeah. A community hero. And immediately Nigel Farage is the villain. Okay. So we are looking at our own time in terms of fairy tales, and we are looking at history in terms of fairy tales. Now, we didn't used to do that. We used to look at evidence. We used to look at what happened, and we would analyze the evidence. Now, the theory leads the facts, or trumps the facts, and it's all about concepts. It's all about theory, and you can do anything with theory. You can go anywhere with theory, and it's particularly good if people are cheering you along and they desperately want to go to the place you're taking them.
Absolutely.
That's it.
And this is a man, Mothin Ali, and I've mentioned him a few times in the show because I've never seen something quite so frightening in that respect in the political realm in the UK, of somebody taking a seat and the first thing he does is start screaming Allahu Akbar. And I know a lot of people, friends of mine, said, oh, that just means God is great or whatever. Well, somebody who thinks that that's what the mind of the British people where their minds go to with Allah Akbar, when you've just been elected to represent them, should not be representing you, because that all it does is 7/7, September 11th. That's what it brings to mind. Regardless, I'm sure there are other. If you had to say something in Arabic, I'm sure there are other ways to praise God that wouldn't have recalled those moments. I would also suggest that had I just taken seat in a place in some Middle Eastern land, I would not be shouting something in English from a different culture and different religion, because it's just divisive. So he's a hero, and yet Tommy Robinson, who's gone on holiday, is divisive, and Nigel Farage. This is what you're saying. It's fairy tales and things.
I mean, there's just one more point to that, because you're talking about history. One of the things that these people do is turn context on and off at will. Okay, so when context serves the theory, serves the concept, then it will be context galore. But as we've seen over the last few days, the awful rioting, and I'm not condoning any of it, but it's just far right. It's just far right. It's not happening because of anything. It's just far right. There's no cause and effect. It's just far right. They just hate brown people. That's it. The end. Let's go on and lock everybody up.
Yeah, it's mad. Whereas when that happened with BLM and all, it was all, what made these people violent? What happened before? And which is good to do, contextualize and understand and whatever. But we don't give that to those. No,
some people get context and other people don't.
We have to have those right wing racists though, because it makes the rest of us feel good. So we have to have those people. Obviously, I mean, I grew up with this firm idea of, if they're going to sort of come for a minority again and start killing people or whatever, as happened to the Jews in the Holocaust, that it would come from some sort of right-wing Hitler-esque way. And I think we've been primed to think that, which leaves us open to really, it's going to come from the other side, obviously. It feels, any time there has been a sort of openly Jew-hating right-wing political campaign, they've just died. The BNP, for example, they got like 1%. No one was interested in Nick Griffin or any of that stuff. so it's obvious to me now that it's going to come from the other side. And I just worry that people are so intent on looking for the Nazi as it was in the 1930s. They don't realize that in the 1930s, people weren't evil. It was just a bunch of Germans wandering about, trying to be efficient as Germans do. And they had this thing. So I know you've seen what's going on and you're worried by it. I mean, the levels of anti-Semitism now in university campuses, which are that sort of far left thing, it's startling, isn't it?
I think the difference, can I just go back to that National Front BNP thing?
Yeah.
Because I think it links onto what I'm going to say. The difference then was that everybody found them all right. They had a high point, whenever it was, in the mid-70s, and the BNP kind of put suits and ties on, and they had a bit of a spike in the 90s, whenever it was. But generally speaking, thinking people, sensible people, thought they were risible, thought they were thuggish, because they were, okay, found their ideas abhorrent, and they were absolutely and totally out of the institutions. The difficulty we've got now is that the people who are, for want of a better word, being anti-Semitic, the Corbynista people who are kind of hiding behind the word Zionism and all of this kind of thing, they work in the public sector, okay? They're in the civil servants, they're in local government, they're in universities. So there's a sense that anti-Semitism, it's one of these things, isn't it, that we all know anti-Semitism is a shape-shifting thing, and it adapts to any particular environment. Over the last 30 years or so, the extreme left, the long march through the institutions, the anti-Israel lobby, the pro-Palestine lobby, just find themselves right at the heart of institutions now. And that's the really scary thing that we've got to deal with. It's actually quite easy to kick a load of thugs off the street, actually, or to send them up when they're chanting abusive slogans. It's not that easy to deal with the civil service. Yeah,
it's scary. And I mean, my whole life I've heard anti-Semitic things, and often from the right, because they're the ones who will say it. And it doesn't. This is something that I know is maybe controversial to say. It doesn't bother me that much, because I just think you're a lunatic who's probably just writing your name in feces on the toilet a minute before. If they were to get any kind of institutional power, then suddenly that would hurt. And I think the reason I say that as well is I want to negate this idea that identity, like criticism or slurs against someone's identity, are somehow, like in a superpower way, worse than any other kind of abuse. I don't believe that. And I know you're not supposed to say that nowadays. I was looking at abuse of football players, for example, and there's a big narrative at the moment that everybody apparently hates the black players for England. They don't feel like they're English, they say, because they're sold this narrative. And there was a study done, I think it was by the Alan Turing Institute, of how much abuse each player got during the World Cup a couple of years ago. And one player had about 6 times more abuse than any other player, and that was Harry Kane, who is the captain and is very much white. And a lot of the abuse comes because he can't speak very well. He has a bit of a speech impediment, and I see no reason that shouldn't be just as painful as some sort of attack on race. And people say, yes, but the history of having a speech impediment is not great either. I don't know what's, and I can say it, and I get to say it using the woke language as a Jew. I've been told this countless times, horrible things. I read it every day. You Mossad agent, you're the big nose, all these things. All right, yeah,
but it's absurd, isn't it?
It's plonkers.
And it's kind of easy to push that away, and I suppose, if someone accuses me of mansplaining something, I was all right, okay, well, you're womansplaining that, okay, fair enough,
but in the institutions, that's scary.
It's not that easy, and it's much more frightening when it's subtle, when it's thought about, when it's complex, when the person doing it is saying, yes, I know what you mean, but this, and critical theory, critical race theory, post-colonialism, what about that? Yeah, that kind of thing. Now, you see that an awful lot. And to me, that is much more frightening, because what we have to do then is read and learn and play them at their own game and beat them at their own game. And what you have to do then is really know your history. Okay? You have to really know your history.
And you do.
I do to a certain extent, but I'm not, I mean, who does?
Presumably you do more than most people.
I know my cultural history, so I do try to contextualize things. But it's the insidiousness of it, I think, which is, to me, we've used this word, we're worried, you're worried about it, I'm worried about it. That's the really worrying thing, because there's almost like a prize at the end of it. If I can be really complex in all of this stuff, I'm not being hateful, I'm just being clever, right? And I'll get rewards for being clever on social rewards on social media, but also actual rewards by qualifications and career development and all of those things. Again, I don't think I'm being ridiculous here. I think this whole thing of, you try and tell someone who's obsessed with Jeremy Corbyn that he's anti-Semitic, right? You just try and do that. You can't do it, right? And they will go to any extreme to tell you that he isn't. And they're educated, they've got degrees, they've got postgraduate degrees, they've had 30 years in the public sector, they've got big pensions, We're not talking about knuckle dragging, far right people from 1978 here. This is a different game, and this is the thing, right? We've, on our side of the fence, we've got to learn how to play the game. And I can understand how people are anti-intellectual and push back against all of the jargon and the gobbledygook and stuff like that. Fair enough. So do I, right? But we've got to understand it before we can really slay it.
You're talking about sort of James Lindsay, Peter Boghossian.
Yeah, I think they're real forces for good, and of course Jordan Peterson as well.
There's a way of if these are people activists, let's say, who are incentivized to continue down this really destructive path by, smugness around their own ego and their own intellect, they need to have some kind of incentive given by someone like you or Peter Boghossian in their language that shows, no, you're actually the evil ones because, now you're the aggressors.
I think if you understand, if you've been mired in the stuff for years, it becomes quite easy to say, no, trans women are men, right? And it because you have a confidence in your own common sense, because a lot of this stuff is just construct upon construct upon construct upon construct, and they don't care about whether any of it makes sense. It's just if it sounds good and if it fits the narrative. So it's puncturing those narratives, and I think being confident about how you do it. But to be confident, again, you kind of have to know what you're talking about.
I imagine some people listening will be saying, okay, you're talking about it is scary when some intelligence people have a conversation and they hate Jews or whatever it might be. They might say that we are two people who might pontificate about Islam being an issue. To me, the difference lies in one being a belief system and one being an ethnicity. Would you agree with that?
I would, but I would also suggest that Islamism, there is a lot of evidence to suggest that Islamism is about conflict and conquering and subjugating and patriarchy and all of those things. All you have to do is just fall back on the evidence. So if you are a queer for Palestine, how do you feel about all of that stuff? No. Forget the gobbledygook. How do you really feel about that stuff? Let's come back to the core issue, right? How do they feel about you? Okay? Because I'm worried about you. in this situation because you are not safe. Okay? Let's think about Iran in 1979. What happened to all of the leftist intellectuals who supported the Ayatollah? Yeah,
Killed.
Yeah,
immediately.
Yeah. All you have to do is look back at history, and they, of course, they will say, "Oh, well, you're cherry picking all of these things. What about da 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 da?" No, I'm not. That's a really important moment in history.
Because I think it's happened elsewhere, has it? Lebanon, I think.
Yeah, I mean, Lebanon, there's 1975, Lebanon just imploded.
Was that
Beirut was the Paris of the Middle East.
Was that sort of a similar Islamo-left alliance?
It was. Yes, it was. I'm saying I know lots about history. I don't know a huge amount about Lebanon actually, so I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail. But this is a beautiful place that has just been devastated, and Gadsard has spoken quite eloquently on that because he's from Beirut.
Well, kicked out, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Another example, exactly. Another example. People are talking about apartheid in Israel, which there isn't one. But I mean, imagine try and be a Jew, and in any of the countries surrounding it, they're all kicked out and or killed.
Well, this heightening of language, we see it, don't we? Immediately, we get this week far right. We've had white supremacist. We have this word apartheid. Where is the apartheid in Israel?
It's really bizarre.
Where is the apartheid in Israel?
I try to devil's advocate it, and the only there's a fundamental misunderstanding, which is so sad because even people who listen to watch this show probably might not have this understanding. They might go, "Oh, maybe there is a bit of an apartheid," or I don't know. And they don't. Israel's extremely multicultural
and extremely liberal.
Yeah, outrageously so. So the only thing I can think is in the actual West Bank itself. If you're an Israeli citizen, you might have rights.
Fair enough.
But to use a word that conjures images of apartheid South Africa is not just disingenuous, it's incredibly insulting to South Africans who went through that.
Of course, it's insulting to Israelis and Jews, but it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
I think just to pick up on a point you've just made there, which I think is a really good point, that idea that Israel is an incredibly multicultural society, an incredibly liberal society, and it works, right? Why does it work? Because they have to put nation state first. If they don't, they'll die. People will wipe them off the face of the earth. So this idea is something that I've been thinking about for quite a long time, which is, what do we do with this? How do we bring all of these disparate warring tribes together in this country? And it's the Roger Scruton thing. It's the idea that we are unified by a nation in which we live, which allows us to have the we, the bigger identity, which is far greater and far more meaningful than LGBTQI plus. And I think that's what Israel has to a certain extent, because it has to, because it's about security. The problem is, I don't know how we get there.
It's a really interesting point, actually. They've got a greater identity that they can all join together with, which is, I'm an Israeli, I'm a Zionist, or whatever that might mean. Zionist means lots of different things. Someone ran up to me I was at a vegan festival the other day. I was speaking to them about cancel culture and cultishness, and if you want to make people listen to your ideas, you have to approach them and debate it, not throw things at them. They're not going to stop eating cows because of that. And most people are actually really receptive. I think there are receptive people out there who understand this and don't want to cancel the other side. But a woman approached me afterwards and she said, "Oh, you say there are cults and things, are there? What about Zionism?" I said, "What do you mean by Zionism?" And she said, "Oh, well, I don't know, but
what they mean is Jews." Is what they mean.
That's what I think. Well, with her it did, and others seem to think it's some sort of New World Order. And I guess there are creepy, weird things going on in the world. There are individuals who do bad things. Epstein was one of them. Unfortunately, it's so frustrating that he's Jewish, and then there's all this conspiracies around that. And it became a bad word, Zionism, both the right and the left. And my understanding of it is just the belief that Israel should be a Jewish
homeland.
And the woman said, well, what other country in the world has something like that? I said, you're standing in one. Love. I didn't say love. But I was like, you're standing in
Darling.
one. Darling. This is one. She goes, what? This? I go, this is Church of England, isn't it? She said, well, come on, she said. I was like, well, what? There's 50 Islamic states around Israel as well. She actually ended up apologising because she was...
That's good.
Yeah, that was great. We had a great interaction.
That's a result. I think I don't mind having interactions like, even if someone disagrees with me. What I object to is someone shouting at me and storming off and thinking I'm wicked. Andrew, I'm really not wicked. Okay. Yeah. One of the things you just telling me that story has reminded me that one of the things we really have to deal with, and one of the things that's so childish or so adolescent, is the performativity around all of this. Okay, so social media obviously is to blame, but the idea that I'm going to demonstrate something to you that is wrong through which is always really cringeworthy, isn't it? Symbolism and play and performance and all of those kinds of things. I'm going to demonstrate, I'm going to have blood on me and I'm going to lie across the M25 or whatever it is. That performativity, we never used to have that in the discourse, right? Well, I suppose it comes from situationism in the 60s and punk in the 70s and the counterculture and all of those kinds of things.
Suffragettes, maybe.
And the suffragettes as well. Okay. I suppose there is a place for it sometimes, but it's like everything else. It just takes over. And what's the driving force here, right? Is it about a particular issue that you want to discuss, that you want to know more about, and that you want to maybe educate people about and be educated? Or do you just want to have your 15 minutes of fame on social media? And the problem I think we've got is that this stuff is ramping up and up and up and up. And it isn't going to be long before we see many, many more killings and extreme acts of violence.
Is that related to the concept of those who can make me believe absurdities, will make me commit atrocities? Because you've said that gender and mass immigration are the two biggest issues of our time. Is that all interlinked then?
I think so. The gender one is really interesting, isn't it? Because it takes us into completely different realms. As far as I know, no one ever had any problem with men dressing up as women, or even men trying to pass as women, or transvestism, as we called it. I certainly didn't, and I don't have, right? And I don't think you have either.
No.
It becomes a problem when you're inverting reality and you're saying, I feel something, therefore I am. It's the old identity thing, isn't it? I feel something, therefore I am. And I have to project that belief onto you, and you have to go along with it. Once you're in that vicinity, once you're in that neighborhood, then all sorts of crazy things can happen, and you end up with, as we said earlier on, you end up with male rapists in female prisons. Because reality goes out of the window. So that compulsion, you must think what I feel, right? That's it, isn't it? You must think and believe what I feel. If you don't, then that's it. And I'm going to protest, and I'm going to perform, and I'm going to do all of those things. I'm going to make you a scapegoat. I'm going to get you to lose your job, all of those things. Yes, I think it is different. And I think you can map that onto mass immigration as well, because we've been seeing exactly the same thing with the narrative over the last, we're recording this on the Tuesday, aren't we? Yeah. Yeah. But you see this in the way the narrative is manipulated all of the time. What we have is people getting very, very sick of it. Okay. getting very sick of being told blatant, utter blatant lies, as you say, by media outlets, by the institutions. And so we tend to look elsewhere. We look elsewhere for our news. I don't go to the BBC anymore. I used to wake up every morning at 6:30 to the Today programme, but I got fed up of them telling me off. So I don't bother anymore. I pick up you shouldn't pick up your phone first thing in the morning, do you? But I pick up my phone, scroll through Twitter, get incredibly angry, and then go about my business. But I don't go to heritage media anymore, because why the hell should I? Because we're in a situation where we can't trust anyone. That's the problem.
6:30 is early.
Well, I get lots of things to do. It takes me an hour to come round, and I quite like to take in the news by osmosis in a way, just like that.
What time do you go to bed?
But I stopped doing it. I go to bed quite early.
You're getting your 8 hours. I'm just making sure.
Because I read. It's lovely. It's lovely that you're making sure. I read. So my big joy in life is just to turn off and disappear in novels. So I've written about having a library of first editions and conserving the culture, because now we have people rewriting old books because they don't fit the narrative. So one of my joys in life is curating a set of books, for want of a better word, a library, because I think that's important, and I love reading. So I read, I sleep, and I don't listen to the Today program.
I think that's a really interesting point, though, just about that you have this other joy in life, because so many of us, we get bogged down in a very important culture. Well, people keep saying it's not important. I mean, it really is very important for the reasons exactly. But so many people I speak to, like Andrew Doyle, and he was a literature reviewer. That's what he wants to be doing. I want to go on making the documentaries I was making before, but because we've said things that are outside of that mainstream, we can't pursue our hobbies, passions, other lives, and you end up stuck in this bubble until the rest of society gets back to being normal again.
Yeah, so many people can identify with that, and I think me more than I love 60s and 70s films, television, literature, and I've written about that for the last 20 years. Hollywood film, film noir, stuff from the 1930s, detective fiction, espionage fiction, all of those things. I'm not doing those things anymore because I'm completely bound up by what's happening, because what's happening is a war on those things.
Yeah.
I'm worried that I won't be able to get an unadulterated version of a James Bond novel, for example, a Fleming novel, for example, because there will come a time when I won't be able to get that.
If things continue this way.
If things continue down the road we're going. So we do have to fight back. I was having a conversation earlier on today. It's all the same stuff, isn't it? I was having a conversation earlier on today, and someone was saying, the Tories the Tories have been waging a culture war over the last 10 years. The Tories couldn't stoke anything up, they're completely useless. But something has been happening around them. Something has been happening, and our culture is being disintegrated. It's being deconstructed, okay, in a way that is there to do it harm. I'm all for, that's what I do. I deconstruct culture. I look at it, I explore it, I analyze it, but it's there in a way to do it harm. It's the only culture that is deconstructed in that way. I'm talking about the West, okay?
They say that
all of the other cultures are celebrated. And that's the problem. It's an uneven playing field. And it's an uneven playing field across the whole agenda.
I've heard it said that the final stage before an empire collapses is sort of when it analyzes itself.
To death.
We're at the end.
To death.
Do you think we're at the end of days?
No. I can't accept that.
You're going to fight?
I won't accept it.
Yeah.
What about you?
think I'll be dead in 30 years, so it doesn't matter anyway.
There is that.
I'm quite nihilistic, and I think that's a difficult thing. I had a chat. I can't remember who it's with. They were talking about effective altruism, the idea of really separating altruism into I know you know, but just into very logical bits and pieces, which ends up at a place you don't want to be, which is like, you know, save a Picasso rather than save a child, because the Picasso's the money from selling it could help other children, which is obviously psychopathic. But there was also how much value do you attribute to people of the future, and you know what is a man's life worth in 1,000 years who isn't yet born and will be in 1,000 years compared to our own? And I thought it was a really interesting place to sort of go down. And obviously, people are worried about climate change and all these kinds of things. And do we care? And I think I've decided, maybe it's psychopathic of me, that the person in 1,000 years I couldn't give a fuck about. Like I don't care because I'm gone. But I think but they don't do a 1-to-1 ratio. I think they say they're worth sort of a 1,000th of what a life is worth today.
I think the difficulty is that, well, first of all, I think most people really, if I had a gun put to my head, I would say the same. I don't care what. I'm going to be here. You know, who knows what's going to happen in 20 years' time? The rate we're going, right? But this idea of we need to save the planet for the future is at least partially neurotic, okay? But it's also bound up in faux virtue as well. I think we could probably agree on that to a certain extent. So it's also immature as well. It's a really immature thing to say that, one, I can save the world, or two, you should completely and utterly moderate your behavior so things are very uncomfortable for you for my future. And I was just at Leeds train station the other day, and there was a mural on the wall, and it was a young person dressed up like in a semi kind of flower powery kind of way, you know, a festival type goer, a Glastonbury type thing, you know, save the future for me. So if you're talking about psychopathy on our side, I'm talking about narcissism on their side.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Gosh. And also a refusal to look at reality, of course. I mean, what you were just saying reminded me. I was watching, I think it was Question Time recently, and I don't know who anyone is, but there was a fellow who I've seen before, but I think he was a conservative, and he made the point that, you know, he does believe in the climate change science, and he says it is awful what's happening, and there will be flooding and things like this. But unfortunately, all the scientific papers he's read show that it's too late to do much about it. It's, you know, we needed to stop 100 years ago. So the best thing we could do now really is
drink champagne and enjoy ourselves.
Well, he said plan for it, you know, build things to stop the water rising and things like that, rather than sacrifice people's livelihoods in the name of climate change. And I thought it was a really sensible point. And you can imagine in Question Time, it didn't go down well because it got booze everywhere. And there was a woman who I believe it must have been a Lib Dem, or maybe it was a Green, just going, oh, right, so another climate change denier. It wasn't what it said. And it's just one of those examples where you, in front of your eyes, you see an entire audience and the other politicians there all going, you denied it. And he was going, oh, no, I didn't. I'm actually agreeing even more of the point. I'm saying we did fuck it up. It's gone too far. And let's look at more practical things to do. No, they just wanted their religious, like, you're out, you're wrong, and let's keep sticking to these plans that aren't working.
It's this big thing, isn't it? It's buying into the myth. And anybody who goes against, and I'm not denying anything here, I'm not denying climate change or anything like that. But that's one thing. And so you plan pragmatically for what may happen.
Yeah.
Okay. And you make decisions which are percentages, okay, of risk.
Yeah.
Rather than I'm a true believer. So they just want true believers. And whenever I'm in a room with true believers, I feel incredibly uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's back to that word, worried again. But I think there's something else to bear in mind, isn't there? in the 1970s,
Hmm.
and I think even into the 1980s, it was freezing. It was climate cooling. That was the big scare. It's all going to be Antarctica in 10,000 years' time. That's within my lifetime. Okay. So I'm not quite sure where the science is going to go. I have an open mind, but I really don't know, because we've completely turned it on its head within the last 50 years. So what's going to happen in the next 50 years? I don't know. God knows what's going to happen to those people 1,000 years away.
Yeah, well, screw them. Hopefully it is just snow everywhere. I don't care. Well, no, we have to always question things. As far as I can tell, most scientists seem to say it's going up by a degree a year. If that's the science, fair enough. If the science also says there's not really much we can do now because we've screwed it, let's plan for something else. Those purity spirals, they exist on, let's call it our side. I don't think we like being on a side, but as well. And I hate it. And I feel that same thing as you. I felt nervous the other day with that Khelif guy, the boxer, who it turns out has XY chromosomes. That's what we believe is true. I don't think anyone's 100% sure. There do seem to be reports that show it, but some people say that might be Russian interference or whatever. But okay. But all I did was ask a question. I said right at the beginning, how sure are we? Because if this is actually just a woman, then it's horrible. Just that. And you can imagine the purity spiral on the gender realist side. And since when is it bad to ask questions?
I think that's what we should be doing. We should be asking questions all the time, but we should also believe the evidence of our eyes as well, and I with that particular issue, it's about two things. It's about safeguarding on the one hand and affirmation on the other. When it comes to a woman being hit in the face, I tend to come down on the side of safeguarding. And so that's my position on that. That's where the conversation starts. And for me, it kind of ends. I'm open to explore what other people have to say, but boxing or kickboxing or whatever it is, the safeguarding thing becomes an issue with me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. What happened with me was that only a few days earlier, we'd had that stabbing of the children, and it had been falsely reported that it was a Muslim who had done it. And I didn't tweet in case, but I did fall for it. I believed it absolutely at home, sitting there. And a lot of people I trust and believe and like a lot were tweeting that. So then I'm hearing, okay, this person's a man who's boxing. And I thought, okay, that's probably true, right? But hang on, let's ask some questions. It's only that. Because if it is a woman, and we're all going, you're a man, as has happened to Serena Williams, as has happened to Michelle Obama, ridiculously. So just hold on and let's be sure of the facts. And once we got the facts, I couldn't agree more with you. I mean, it's mental. And it does seem like this is a person who has XY chromosomes and will or should be, at least after puberty, aware that they're a guy. So,
I mean, that's the big thing, isn't it? What do you know about yourself? And if you know X and Y about yourself, why are you going into a ring? I mean,
it's unforgivable.
Anybody I've done some boxing. When I was a teenager, I went to a boxing club, and not for very long, because do you know what? I didn't like getting hit in the face. Yeah,
that's smart.
Imagine
how smart you'd be. You'd be an even better professor.
But there's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to hide in a boxing ring. Okay, so if you know you've got XY chromosomes, then you really shouldn't be there. That's the discussion.
No, I absolutely agree. I've got one more question for you, but first tell me where people can find your excellent work.
Well, most of my work is peer reviewed, so that means it's behind paywalls, unfortunately. But I've written for Spiked. I've written a few articles for Spiked about things like BLM and about the culture of alteration with cultural artifacts that we've talked about. I've written there. I've written chapters for the New Culture Forum in our excellent trilogy of books about the culture wars, Fighting Back, The Long March to the Institutions, and the final one which is called State of Emergency. So I've got chapters in two of those books, and they really are well worth looking at because they've got other people in them as well, like Konstantin Kiszely, Eric Kaufman, and so on and so forth, people that people might be aware of. I'm on New Culture Forum every I'll be back on New Culture Forum every week on the New Speak show that people might watch, the discussion show, and I'm on GB News and Talk TV and things like that.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Who is a heretic you admire?
Christopher Marlowe.
Tell me about Christopher Marlowe.
Christopher Marlowe was a playwright. He was a contemporary, but just before, of Shakespeare. We're talking about culture, and I'm interested in television, film, literature, drama, and all of that kind of thing. He was dangerous. He was inventive. He was talented. He was hedonistic. He was murdered at 29. He was stabbed in the eye in an inn in Deptford. He was a spy, government spy.
Wow.
He was accused of, heaven forbid, homosexuality. He was accused of being a devil worshipper.
Wow.
He reflected, in some ways, the excitement of the culture of that time, but he completely challenged it as well. He was a remarkable person. There's a book called The Reckoning, which is worth exploring. He's one. I'm gonna cheat and have another one as well, if I can.
Before you do, I just want to say I've got Christopher Marlowe here, and the first thing that comes up is an article with Christopher Marlowe's face, which he looks a bit like Blackadder or something. He's got that sort of look from paintings, I suppose, but covered in rainbow things. And the article says, claiming Christopher Marlowe's place in queer history.
He would hate that.
Yes, he would.
Yeah.
But go on. What's your other one?
I think the other person, it's very obvious, but speaking as an academic who's going through a fairly trying time at the moment, I hugely admire and value Jordan Peterson.
Do you have an impression? Everyone has to do an impression when they mention Jordan Peterson.
Well, I can't do the Kermit the Frog thing, but you know, I'll try. No, I can't do it.
I love that. There was a story Francis Foster told me about that, and he said Jordan apparently said to him, people always tell me that I sound like Kermit the Frog, and I didn't know who that was, so I looked it up. And I do sound like him.
Yes, I've seen it. Yeah.
Oh, I loved that.
I mean, I knew you were going to ask me that. I should have. I'm from Manchester originally, so I should have got some real. I should have said Noel Gallagher or something like that. So I could talk like that. You know what I'm saying, don't you?
I like that. Well, to do Liam, for example, you've got to do that thing where they hold their hands behind their back. It's sort of show behind back because it's showing they don't want to get arrested. They walk. It's like the most aggressive, passive pose you can do. Like what? I don't have anything. Yeah. And he sings like that, Liam. Yeah. I notice he sings like, I'm not what, but always having a go. People, please go and get Philip's work. I'll put some links in the description. He's a wonderful, wonderful guest, given up his time to come on here. So please do start clicking on all the places. Keep watching this channel, hit the like button. And also, I've got one more question for Philip on Substack. That's andrewgoldheretics.com. One of you asked a question that I want to get to Philip now. So we'll see you over there now.